Welcome to Bonehead. Jeez, 2022 killed all kinds of motherfuckers.
Well, also it killed some good people.
Yeah, I tell you, they're just going quick. And there's a bunch of other artists that we're not even going to talk about today.
Well, and by the way, in case you're watching this in the future, assuming there is one, it's 70 degrees in the winter, folks. It could go either way. Anyway,
It's 30.
It was.
We're expecting
we're back
86.
down now. Yeah. Anyway,
we're going to be ravaged by ticks come summer.
I thought he was going to say tits. I really did. I was like, well, ravage me. Wrong, man. Wrong.
We need to do that. Can we once again? Let's get Lloyd Kaufman on the phone and pitch Jurassic something. I literally just have that. It'd be all we need is just this image of we'll use forced perspective, us standing there peacefully as they attack. Anyway. Speaking of forced perspective, we're what? We're less than.
Well, we are recording this on January the 15th.
Yeah, we're less than
9:55 p.m. on a Saturday. We are expecting snow tomorrow in the Lexington area, Lexington, Kentucky is where we're based out of. But people are dying left and right. Now they are always dying.
Yeah, people always die.
But there's some what we've called before iconoclasts that all went rapidly, really quickly at the first of this year.
And by the way, with a couple exceptions, it's not shocking that they died. There's some exceptions.
One exception.
Just one exception out of the ones we're going to talk about.
But it's still one of those things where you're like, really? Like back to back to back? And then on top of that, I didn't know this. You all may have known this. I'm not hip and with it like you kids today. But on top of all this news of these iconic figures, by the way, I'm not to spoil one person that we'll talk about, but I'm wearing Golden Girl pants right now. They're sleep pants.
I was going to say panties. I wanted to see them. I wanted to see the Golden Girl panties and go, oh, Blanche.
Anyway, well, they would have to be all Blanche, right? And they would have to be very form-fitting. Anyway, the point being, though, is on top of everything else, I found out that Bill Engvall's retiring from stand-up, and you all didn't tell me.
No, why? No. I didn't know he was still doing it.
Well, he by the way,
did he finally get a sign?
I don't know if you all know this or not. But
did somebody actually laugh at one of his jokes and say, "I'm done"?
He has also written dramas and things like that. He's a very talented individual. But I didn't know he was. I mean, it's just a sign of the times. However you feel about Bill Engvall, which I would actually argue to me, he is the second most entertaining of people on the Redneck Comedy Tour or Blue Collar. Comedy
he's a deep fourth for me, but yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I like him more than. Sorry, I know y'all are huge Larry the Cable Guy fans, but
I like Larry the Cable Guy better than I do Bill.
He makes me laugh. Yeah, he's made me laugh.
I don't so much.
Yeah, Foxworthy's made me laugh more than Bill.
Yeah.
I
used to.
I go Ron White's top.
Yeah, no one's arguing that.
Yeah, Ron White's number one. I've seen Ron White.
Ron White was not the original fourth.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it was replaced. Yeah. I remember. I don't forgot who dropped out or they fired, but
and then they spun off, and obviously Ron White went so long, and then he dropped out as well.
I don't know who. I don't know who. Remember who it was, but I believe it was something about asking him why Jeff Foxworthy gets top billing or something like that, and the next day he was gone.
I don't know if that's a true story or not. I know
that might be wrong.
I know that Ron White had to tone down and PG his act,
right?
But and by the way, it was the right decision for Ron White and his career.
Yeah.
But that's a FYI for you all. Ron White was not the original fourth in the Redneck Kings of Comedy or whatever it's called.
Blue Collar Comedy Tour. Sorry.
There you go.
That being said, no, I brought that up though, and I mean it somewhat seriously because I think it's just a sign of the times that we're getting older, and a lot of the people that we grew up. And if nothing else, they were background noise. Bill Engvall had his own TV show. He did all the tours. He did all that stuff.
He did a lot of spinoff, and he was very popular with that "Here's Your Sign" thing at one point. You're absolutely right. He's much more successful than the three of us.
Well, but he's also an author. He's done a lot. He gets credit for "Here's Your Sign," but he wrote a lot of stuff. He wrote dramas. He screenplays, things like that. Very talented. maybe not your cup of tea. But that being said, I just read it and I'm
figure
like,
out how these better than Betty White.
man, no.
Yeah.
It was just a sign of the times moment for me. I'm like, God, Betty White's dead. Bill Engvall's retiring.
Dead.
Jim Varney's been dead a long time. I mean, when does it stop, Joe? When
It doesn't.
Well, eventually it does. You die.
Well, yeah,
That's what
but
today's
time keeps on
episode is
going.
about.
You stop. It doesn't.
See, if I learned anything from music from, I think, the 1980s, time keeps on slipping into the future.
I heard that live. So what we're basically going to do now, we've
got to feed the children.
We've not done a rest in peace show for everyone, but if you've ever noticed, and if you're a fan of the show and you followed us for many years, for over 4 years now, is that if it's somebody that means a lot to us, we'll stop and say, this is the reason they mean a lot to us. And we're going to dedicate the next hour to 2 hours. Now, James had the idea to dedicate an hour to Betty White. The issue is we didn't really know that we could do an hour on Betty White. Now, I love Betty White. I'm a huge, out of the three of us, I'm the biggest Golden Girls fan.
Yep.
I don't know. Do you have the pants?
I don't, but it's probably because they don't make them in my size.
Do you have a coffee mug?
Well, no one bought me one. No.
Well, then I guess we need to reevaluate this ranking.
Let's quickly.
I didn't know it was all based on the merchandising.
I would say let's quickly make this into what I'll just refer to as a Miller argument, and you know where this is going. Have you read the extended novels?
So I'm pretty sure I could win at the trivia contest, but we'll move right along on this one. I guess I need to do a better job with the merchandising. But the thing is right after that, the three other people that we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to talk about four people. Betty White is the one that we'll all talk about. And I basically died within 2 weeks of this. And as we were discussing, I said, why don't we just do an episode? Because these other folks may not be someone we can do a whole episode on. Well, actually, a couple of them I could probably.
Oh, we could probably, yeah.
But let's at least do one episode where we remember things that maybe you won't remember them for, that we remember them for, or that are important. Like, for example, James, you're talking about Bill Engvall and his writing. When Carrie Fisher passed, we didn't do an episode on Carrie Fisher, but what I always say, and what I posted on social media was, yeah, she is our princess, but at the same time, actually the thing that she probably had more effect, or not, shouldn't say more effect, but what she was more talented was as a writer. And I don't think most people knew that Carrie Fisher, specifically if they knew her from just Star Wars, knew what a talented writer she was.
Yeah, and she cleaned up a lot of scripts.
Oh, she was a script doctor. She was a screenwriter. Yeah. She was an author. She was all these things. And she was a comedy genius.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly.
She just happened to get cast as a princess in Star Wars.
Because she did Family Guy voiceover work and was hilarious playing largely an against type character. But then on top of that, I mean, Austin Powers, anytime she popped up, the product was better. And Blues Brothers always comes to mind for me. But anyway, this is not about.
Yeah, it's not about. So who wants to go first?
Well, and before we do talk, we do want to talk about the fact that, well, I'll bring that up in my next. So yeah, why don't you all go first?
All right, I'll start because it took me a minute. Chad was bemoaning, and I agree with him that we didn't have enough time to research. And I agree. We were locked down this week we're all fine, but exposure and how the life is. And when you're locked down with kids, it's hard to do research because you're still trying to do your job.
Oh yeah.
But the person who passed in the last week or two, whom I'm pretty sure is a huge son of a bitch. I know this. I never met him, whom I am a huge admirer of, a huge fan of his art, of his writing, of him. But I don't think I'd want to spend more than an hour or two in a room with him, was Peter Bogdanovich. Now, for some of you all out there who are cinephiles, you're going to know who that is. And for some other you folks, you're not going to know who in the hell that is. Unless you're a huge Sopranos fan. If you're a huge Sopranos fan, Peter Bogdanovich played the Shrink's Shrink. He also was in many other movies. In fact, he started out as an actor. He studied with Stella Adler. But Peter Bogdanovich... Go ahead.
You know his quote about that? Why he ended up a director?
Why?
The only I'll try to find the exact quote, but basically what he said was it was the only way he could play every role in the movie.
He loved cinema. Peter Bogdanovich was born to immigrants who were trying to flee the Holocaust, and they made their way here to the United States. And he is of a generation where he could actually, at that time, TV became the babysitter in the late 50s, 60s. But before that, the babysitter was actual movie theater. And if you lived in New York, or if you lived in big enough town, there were several cinemas. And you could drop a kid off with a quarter. I'm just going to say a quarter, gentlemen, but you know what I'm talking about. But right, a nickel.
And they would get an RC and moon pie and watch movies all day.
Probably not New York City, but they would get cartoons and 2 or 3 movies. And they could get soda, and there was a day of entertainment. And it was, if you read enough books, like I have over the years about some of these people, that was their babysitter. And he was one of them. He grew up on cinema. He loved cinema, so much so that he wanted to be an actor, studied with Stella Adler. It didn't quite work out. I mean, he had a lot. And then he started programming, and sorry, I had this pulled up. He started programming in New York. I think it was for I am so sorry I missed this. I had it pulled up and it disappeared. And that's basically how he got kind of started, because then he would program movies. He loved directors before people loved directors. Okay, so that's a new thing. And when I mean a new thing, directors being rock stars only happened in the last 60 years. Probably starting right around the 70s. So people knew who Hitchcock was.
I was going to say, when we got out of the studio system,
when they
Dennis Hopper and all of, that's when the director became the focus for the most part.
And a lot of it come from Europe, of the director being there a tour, and they became rock stars like Spielberg, like Coppola. And for most of you all don't realize, 50 years before that, John Ford could walk up and down the street and nobody knew who the hell John Ford was.
Yeah, nobody knew who the hell Frank Capra was.
No, they didn't know these people. And they could go to actual film school in the 60s. John Carpenter talked about many times, one of the great things about going to USC in the late 60s was that he had access to people that he never would have had access after or before, because these people would actually come to their classes and speak. He met almost all of his idols. And they weren't considered rock stars. The only probably rock star, Chad, was what? Hitchcock?
Yeah.
Because he put himself in his movies, and because people knew him from TV and they knew him. He was probably, I may be wrong. Somebody out there who's a film historian knows more than me might correct me, but Hitchcock,
they might come back with John Huston or somebody like that. But yeah, no, I definitely think nobody was at that level of Hitchcock, because Hitchcock put himself in his commercials. He put himself in the TV shows. Hitchcock was in your face.
The name was above the title.
Yeah.
It was Hitchcock Psycho. The name was above the title.
Right.
Hitchcock was the first, to me, rock star, auteur, Hollywood filmmaker. Peter Bogdanovich worshiped these people. Yes, James.
Well, here's the exact quote. I wanted to get this quote directly from Peter Bogdanovich. When somebody asked him about why he ended up a director, at a certain point, and I don't really know, but people have asked me this. I don't know exactly what it was that pushed me towards directing, but I think it was a naive notion that if I directed, I would be able to play all the roles. It was a kind of creed.
So, thank you. At the end, he basically started programming movies for the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. He started writing criticism. He wrote a book on John Ford. He also wrote about Howard Hawks, who was also Carpenter's favorite director. He started becoming obsessed with Truffaut, Godard. And then he somehow ended up meeting a lot of these people, becoming friends with them, which we've done similar in the sense of we haven't become friends, but right, gentlemen, we've interviewed some of these people and kind of hit it off, because a lot of these people are what I've found, the thing that keeps repeating, is nerds, geeks like us. They're just nerds who just happen to be more successful. And we have developed friendships with some of them. And he did the same thing. And what happened is it ended up getting him a shot of meeting with Roger Corman. And he ended up working for Corman a little bit. And he moved his family out to LA. And Corman gave him his first. He was one of the rewriters of The Terror. He shot some of Second Unit. He's like, "Oh, can I shoot Second Unit?" And Corman, anyone can shoot Second Unit. That's my world's worst Roger Corman. The best Roger Corman comes from an episode with Courtney B. Joyner. No one does a better Roger Corman than Courtney B. Joyner, right off the top of my head. Anyway, so Roger Corman said, I have all this leftover footage from The Terror of Boris Karloff, and I want you to make a movie out of it. If you can make it for, I don't remember the amount, guys. If you can, it's basically less than $100,000, which even then was a pittance. If you can make the movie for that, shoot it in X weeks and use this 20 or 30 minutes of footage, I have another 4 days that he owes me, Boris owes me. You can shoot that, and if you can make a movie. So he did. And it's this movie that I'm going to pull up right now that I had just in front of me a second ago, called Targets, which actually wasn't a huge hit. And basically, I can't remember the serial killer's name, the one in Dallas who climbed the bell tower. Do you guys remember his name?
Yeah. No, I don't remember. I mean, I remember the
basically
news.
So it's this horror movie actor played by Boris Karloff, some of the footage. So he was able to basically write this screenplay. Corman said this screenplay is amazing, but you're going to need Karloff for more than the 4 days. He goes, just pay him for another week. So he basically got him for a week and so many days. He shot around him. Karloff was towards the end of his life. This is in the late 60s, and he was not in good health. And it's about a guy who loses his mind, starts killing people, shooting them, and a horror movie star that kind of converge in one day. These two lives meet. It's a wonderful film. It wasn't a huge hit, but it was a critical hit, and it gave him access to be able to make another movie, which is my favorite movie of his. Some other people like, I don't know. I'm trying to think.
The Great American.
I just, nothing's better than The Last Picture
Show.
And because
why did I call it The Great American? I was going to say The Great American Picture Show.
No, it's The Last Picture Show. The original novel was written by Larry McMurtry. If you guys don't know who that is, you've probably heard of Lonesome Dove. He wrote that book. The Last Picture Show, fantastic movie with Timothy Bottoms, Jeff Bridges. Want to give everybody credit. Some of these people in their first film: Ellen Bernstein, Ben Johnson, Cloris Leachman, Randy Quaid, and Sybil Shepherd. A couple of people nominated for Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor. One of them won. And it basically was a huge hit and rocketed his career. He subsequently left his wife and 2 kids, moved in with Sybil Shepherd, who then had an affair. I just want to talk about this a little bit with Elvis. And gentlemen, I always love this story because, you know, your wife, you leave your wife for your girlfriend Sybil Shepherd, probably one of the hottest young starlets at the time, right, gentlemen, in the early 70s.
Oh, yeah.
And she was a beautiful woman. And she has an affair with someone else, and you're going to get pissed, but Jesus, it's Elvis. Sorry. I don't know why I'm defending Elvis, but you kind of have that one coming. Do you want to hear a funny story? What I've been told and what I've read is that he could never remember Peter's last name, so he called him Dogovich. Elvis said, "You going home to Dogovich?" Anyway. So eventually they break up, and there's more tragedy that befalls him. He falls in love with a young starlet again in the early 80s, who's tragically killed by her manager. They made a movie about it called Star 80, which he's always hated. He also ended up marrying her sister, who was 30 years younger than him. Did you guys know
that? No.
Yeah. That was, he was married to her in the 80s through some of the 90s, and actually spent most of his later life after they were divorced with her and her mother.
Jeez.
It's a little
you know, as talented as he is, his personal life was a train wreck. It always was.
But he made so many good things. Dogovich also was really, Paper Moon is one that people love that I like, but I my problem is it suffers from something that he can't help.
You hate Ryan O'Neal.
I just don't like Ryan O'Neal.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
Do you?
Okay, side note. Stanley Kubrick, the only film of Stanley Kubrick's I had never seen was Barry Lyndon.
Yep.
And I saw it this past year, and I didn't mind it. I actually enjoyed it.
It's a good movie. It's beautiful.
But then I didn't know Joe's we've known each other for years, and I did not know of his hatred of Ryan O'Neal, and he went off on me about Ryan O'Neal. Like,
well, it's just, there's a friend of mine whom I knew when I was discovering cinema, when I was a young teenager. He ran a video store. I'm going to call him Jerry. That was his name. I'm going to say his last name. He got into some trouble too. I often have friends who've gotten into trouble and they've left my life. And Jerry introduced me to that movie, and he said, of course, you're the number one director in the world, and you're going to make this movie about the French. Is it the 17th century, right, Chad?
Yeah,
but Napoleonic times.
We're getting off topic, but it was because he couldn't make his Napoleon movie, so he made Barry Lyndon.
Lyndon. And then you cast who, Chad?
Ryan O'Neal.
It stick Jerry going off on that tangent in Eastern Kentucky 30 years ago or 20 some years ago. Chad, is just stuck in my head, and it probably has influenced me a little bit, but I always think, and you cast fucking Ryan O'Neal.
Now I will say this:
he was a star of the time. He really was.
And Ryan O'Neal, I have in other films, I do not like Ryan O'Neal. I'm with Joe. He's a wooden actor.
He's okay in Barry Lyndon,
but he's just wooden.
Maybe he's distracted by Farrah Fawcett. You all ever think about that?
That's true. Well, here, back to it. For every huge film he'd have, there was an Illegally Yours. There was a Nickelodeon, which is a terrible picture. But there's also, he directed Mask with Cher. He directed To Serve with Love too for the TV. That was a bad movie.
I never realized Bogdanovich directed Mask.
Yeah, he directed Mask.
Oh, and he's got so many great comments about Cher that seem like they're so very, very different. One quote that he has about Cher, let me make sure I get this correct, is Cher is one of the most talented women I've ever met. She's got depth and emotions that haven't even been touched. He said that, but he also followed that with, Cher and I did not get along.
Yeah, not a shocker. One of I was trying to find the producer's name. He also Erwin Winkler. He also produced Rocky. He produced a couple of Scorsese films you may have heard of called Raging Bull. He also produced Casino and Goodfellas, but he produced Nickelodeon, and he told the story, and this is what kind of son of a bitch Peter Bogdanovich was. He was on a horse directing, and Erwin walked up to him. Now, this movie was made in the late 70s. There's no reason to be on the horse. And he said, right, why in the fuck are you on a horse directing, Peter? Well, John Ford did it. If Jack Ford directed on a horse, then I should direct on a horse. He said, yeah, but you're no Jack fucking Ford. Anyway, but he loved John Ford, and he did make some good movies. The last great movie that Peter Bogdanovich made, in my estimation, is a movie that no one else has seen for the most part. But Chad, it stars one of your favorite actors of all time, one of your favorite character actors, Herman
Munster.
Oh my God, Joe. Help me.
Come on, Chad.
No, dude, my brain's gone today. What is it?
It's called The Cat's Meow. I actually forgot Herman's last name and was trying to get you to do it.
Oh my God.
That's okay. Let me while you're doing it, I'm going to pull up The Cat's Meow because I want to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, because now I can't. I'm so beating myself up because my brain is fried and I can't remember the guy's name.
That's all right.
It's Edward. He's one of my favorite. Huh?
Edward Herman.
Edward Herman.
Well, this movie has Kirsten Dunst, Carrie Elwes, Eddie Izzard, Jennifer Tilly, and Edward Herman. If you've never seen it, it's based on a semi-true story of a Hollywood murder. And Jad, I bet you've heard about this from several of your true crime podcasts. I don't mean that in a bad, disparaging way. It's just Chad knows more about William Randolph Hearst's yacht. And there was a publicist who was murdered, a producer who was murdered on it. And that's true. And it was covered up. And this movie is based on that, of what really happened. So Eddie Izzard,
no one knows what happened.
No one knows exactly what happened because it was what?
It was complete because William Randolph Hearst was a media mogul. I mean, he was the Rupert Murdoch of the 1920s.
Jennifer Tilly plays Louella Parsons. Louella Parsons had this famous rag that she wrote about basically what was going on with the stars, and she got a lifetime contract over whatever happened on that boat.
Right. Yeah. She worked for even before then, she worked for Hearst exclusively. but that pretty much secured her livelihood for the rest of her life.
She had a lifetime contract. Eddie Izzard plays Charlie Chaplin, who also was there that weekend. So someone was murdered. This talks about what could have happened on that boat. Have you guys ever seen it?
I love the cat's meow.
Yeah, it's on IMDb for free. Another thing that I wrote, as I was talking about, he wrote several novels. He's a great writer.
Sorry, back to the cat's meow. The only problem I had with the cat's meow, and it's nothing bad, is the big problem I had was I had a hard time picturing Eddie Izzard as Charlie Chaplin. I could never get into that performance.
I agree. I don't think he's Chaplin. I think he's slightly miscast. He's a good actor, but I think he's slightly miscast in that.
But other than that, I love the film.
Yeah. And Edward Herrmann is one of the best character actors of all time. Chad's not wrong.
I know. Yeah. Him and Luis Guzman.
Yeah, Luis Guzman is a good comedy actor. I don't know if he's a great character actor, but he's a good comedy actor.
The Count of Monte Cristo.
He's just funny in it. I'm going to go back to my original statement. So one of the things, how I kind of, other than I love Targets when I saw it as a kid, and then I saw The Last Picture Show, which actually, by the way, they made a sequel to it in the early 90s called Texasville, which is also a really good movie. It's not in black and white. But is this guy here? So if you're listening to it, you can't see, but it's called This is Orson Welles, and it's by him and Peter Bogdanovich. So Orson lived with Peter for almost a decade. He lived in the house. Sybil Shepherd can tell stories about them smelling a fire and walking up, and Orson had fallen asleep and left a cigar lit and had caught fire in his room, and he wouldn't let them in as he was trying to put it out. He and Peter had a love kind of hate relationship. I think Peter saw him as a father figure, as a mentor, and Orson loved him, but also hated him because he had all the success that Orson craved. And this, by the way, is Armchair Psychology. But one of the best books I love about Orson is his interviews that he and Peter did over the course of many, many years, where he talks in depth about so many different things. I love This is Orson Welles. It's one of my favorite books about Orson Welles. As many of you all know, Orson Welles is another person whom I doubt that I would have wanted to spend more than an hour with in a room, but love his art. So what did we say before? Love the artist, love the art and try to ignore the artist. However, a quick story about this, and then I'll end my Dogovich thing, is that when this was done, it was done in the early 70s. Well, Orson ended up signing another contract with another publisher and didn't give the money back on one he was supposed to do with this. So this actually wasn't published till well after Welles was dead. And Peter actually paid his part back, Orson's part back for him, because Orson was once again notorious for never having money. Like he lived with Peter for years and years and years. So if you're a fan of Orson Welles, if you're a fan of John Ford, read some of the books that Bogdanovich did. If you've never seen Targets or The Last Picture Show or The Cat's Meow, those are the three movies I love by him. Targets, simply because I know the story of how it was made and how little he had to work with, and what a superior film he brought out of a system that Corman didn't necessarily always make superior films.
But real quick, Joe, do you know two of the films that Bogdanovich said he thought were his best?
Which two are they? It's not Nickelodeon.
No, Saint Jack and They All Laughed.
Yeah, I actually don't think I've ever seen Saint Jack.
Well, and here's what he says about it. He says Saint Jack and They All Laughed. This is from 2006 is when he said this. Were two of my best films, but never received the kind of distribution they should have. So nobody knows. And real quick, did you know he was working on the film when he passed away?
No, but that doesn't surprise me. They were always working. I actually didn't realize he directed an episode of The Sopranos too, but keep going.
He was working on a project about the Gershwin brothers.
Oh,
so Porgy and Bess. And he was working on it with, hold on, I'm trying to get the name right of who he's working on it with. But he was going to direct. And one of the things he already said, and he had full knowledge of, is, I'm going to have another director with me because of my age. And he did have Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but Kashner was who he was working on it with. And so they wanted to do it in black and white, though, like The Last Picture Show, because if you don't know Porgy and Bess, brain freeze.
Well, while you're saying that, I want to
get Gershwin brothers.
Yeah.
Obviously were historic. So it would have been another period piece because he loved period pieces.
one last thing. I'm so sorry before I can move off of him. I do need to give credit. He did a documentary for Turner Classic Movies. It's one of the better documentaries I've ever seen about Buster Keaton.
Who he loved.
He loved Buster. Yeah, and a lot of people feel that he has always been overshadowed and shouldn't have been by Chaplin. But Buster Keaton, he did one of the best documentaries I've ever seen about Buster Keaton. If you get a chance to check it out, Turner Classic Movies, if you have it, do that. All right, who's next?
James. And neither one of them were Harold Lloyd.
Yeah, Mel Brooks talks about Harold Lloyd. You're right. He's often forgotten, and I've only seen snippets.
Oddly enough, the children of Harold Lloyd almost filed a suit against the Water Boy because it takes heavily from The Freshman, starring Harold Lloyd. Silent film. Check it out.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Joe, Chad, you said you wanted me to go.
Yeah, you go.
I'm going to talk about the only person, and my notes were up and now they've disappeared. But the only person we'll be talking about this evening that was knighted by the Queen.
Did not know that.
Lewis.
And that would, of course, be the recently late, not overly shocking that he passed away, Sidney Poitier. Now, and by the way, this was I had to figure out how that happened because normally Americans are not allowed to be knighted, and Poitier was born in Florida. So how did he get knighted? Well, his family was not American. They just happened to be visiting Florida when he was born. They were from the Bahamas.
Oh, okay.
And the Bahamas at the time of his birth was
it's a they still have a British embassy there.
Yeah.
It's in Nassau. It's a beautiful white building in Nassau right there off Main Street.
But they were under the crown, so he would be eligible for knighting. So Sir Sidney Poitier, he never used the Sir, but I'm going to give it to him now.
Well, he would, but he'd only do it with love.
So that coming couldn't avoid it. No, Sidney Poitier is, he gets credit for a lot of things, and he did do just about everything.
He directed, he acted, he wrote.
Yeah, he worked with talent. Most of it.
No shit, James.
No, you didn't let me finish. He worked with talent, some of which we can still mention. The other was Bill Cosby. Count it. No, but honestly, if you don't know who Sir Sidney Poitier is, I don't know what to tell you. He came up in a system that obviously was not welcoming to African Americans at all. And he made these films. And one of the things that was a great quote I read about him, and I forget who said it. Joe, you may know because it's a relatively famous quote. And I think it was said by a director. I just don't know which one.
Yeah.
Was that Sidney Poitier made films that couldn't be edited. And what he meant by that was there was a process in the 1960s that if you were going to have a film and you're going to have some African Americans in it, and now you would want to put them in scenes that they could be edited out for certain marks.
Was it Norman Jewison? I have no idea.
That may be it.
Norman Jewison directed him in The Heat of the Night.
I need to look that. And they said that with Sidney Poitier, if he was on screen, you could. I mean, obviously, A, he was a talent, but B, he was just compelling. You just wanted to watch what he did. And so Sidney Poitier came up through a system. He was part of the New York City African-American theater scene with Harry Belafonte. They met. And by the way, they were both trying to work at their acts, and they couldn't afford to live off their talents initially at, I think, about 15 and 16 years of age. So they would, like, it was, oh, you're going to act. And then when the theater closes, you're going to sweep the floors, you're going to clean the bathroom. And it's just amazing to me to think about, it wasn't enough that he had all this talent. He went on to win, obviously, a lot of awards. He was the first African-American and the first Bahamian.
Bahamian?
Struggle with the word. Bahamian, but he was Bahamian. What is it, Joe? I'm sorry. There you go. Anyway, but the first one to win an Academy Award for Best Actor. He went on to also receive 2 competitive Golden Globes, a competitive British BAFTA, the British Academy Awards. He won a Grammy for Best Spoken Word Album. I I mean, he just did so much. When he passed, the outpouring came from everybody from former President Barack Obama, Joe Biden. I mean, everybody came out and said great things about him. Now, he wasn't a flawless individual. If you want to pry into someone's social life, this is another time when probably need to separate the art from the artist a little bit. But he was married to Juanita Hardy initially, married in 1950. They divorced in 1965. The problem was he lived with another partner, Diane Carroll, from 1959 to 1968. And you may notice there's a little bit of an overlap there in time. Whoops.
That's not his fault.
Well, I mean, and obviously, now the other thing about it though is much like Shirley Temple,
Sidney Poitier.
Much like Shirley Temple, he didn't just act. He went on to be an ambassador to Japan. He was an ambassador to a country. He was an ambassador for UNESCO as well, UNESCO, sorry. And he won Lifetime Achievement Awards as well, obviously from the Academy Awards, but also BAFTA gave him the BAFTA Fellowship for Lifetime Achievement. His movies, going back to the Defiant ones, which starred Tony Curtis, where they're escaped convicts together. Mm-hmm. That was where he got a nomination for Best Actor. And then he went on to play in Lily of the Fields, where he's a handyman working with German-speaking nuns. Lilies of the Field, oddly enough, I don't think he gets talked about much anymore, but I can remember when I was younger, people adored that movie. Speaking of Porgy and Bess, and he received acclaim for it, A Raisin in the Sun, A Patch of Blue. As Joe made the reference earlier, he did star in, especially in, and these all came out in 1967, which blew my mind, 3 what were considered race relation films at the time. To Serve with Love.
Yep.
Guess Who's Coming to Get Dinner? And
it's a different kind of movie, and it Guess Who's Coming to Get Dinner.
Me.
I did it last time, you son of a bitch.
Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and In the Heat of the Night, which Carol O'Connor really overshadowed him in. That joke's for 4 people. Anyway, and he won the Academy Award for Best Performance in the Heat of the Night. So he then went into directing, and he directed comedy films like Stir Crazy.
Can we just pause real quick?
Yeah,
that's the one that blew my mind later on. I was a huge Gene Wilder fan and a huge Richard Pryor fan, and it never would have occurred to me that Stir Crazy, where they go to prison, is directed by Sidney Poitier.
Poitier, yeah.
I mean, that one was the one that blew my mind. I was like, what? Who directed this? What?
Well, he directed for a while. And then he decided to return to acting, and he did films that people still love to talk about. Shoot to Kill came up in another one of our episodes recently, and Sneakers. A lot of people have a soft spot in their heart for Sneakers.
I do. I still love Sneakers.
I love soft sneakers.
He was originally, by the way, he was granted his knighthood in 1974, so it was not near the end of his life. It was pretty early on that he got knighthood. Meanwhile, I'm still working at it. Call me up, Queenie. Anyway, knighthood, Cecil B. DeMille Award. That was 1982. Kennedy Center Honor in 1995. Named number 22 in the top 100 stars of all time by the AFI. And then was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Barack Obama. Now, he did also make some, let's just say some films that weren't great.
Turkeys.
Yeah. They were dry, overcooked. They were, so some of his earlier works. So you hear the big one, Blackboard Jungle got some attention. But then you get some ones that have kind of been forgotten. Goodbye, My Lady, Edge of the City, Something of Value. Pop up in The Greatest Story Ever Told. And he also did narration for documentaries, including one about King, which was Montgomery to Memphis. So it was not about Elvis, Joe. It was about a different King.
Yeah, I got it.
I thought you might. He also, though, pops up, and I wanted to mention this because it's a place that I did not initially think he would pop up. He pops up in some documentaries, obviously playing himself, and one of the best pop-ups is, of course, in Mr. Warmth, the Don Rickles project.
But that's what's one of the that's the great thing about documentaries, and specifically that one directed by John Landis, is just the people who intertwine. Right. If you've been watching work, well, Chad's going to talk about our next fallen person, but the people who were his friends, and why we never think of this, right? People meet people. We have friends that people normally would associate with us. But Don Rickles and Sidney Poitier hanging out in a room talking.
Yeah. And just to be a fly on the wall, right?
Right.
How cool is that? Yeah.
Because one's Don Rickles. I'm sorry. I just the shit that would have been said. Keep going.
Well, so he did direct. Now, again, some of the stuff he directed is almost regrettable at this point, and who am I to say that? But the first film he directed was Buck and the Preacher, which is him and Harry Belafonte, and I'll tell a story about the two of them momentarily. But then A Warm December. That is largely forgotten, but then you get Uptown Saturday Night. Again, him and Harry Belafonte.
Mm-hmm.
That's
one I've actually wanted to see that I've never found a copy of. Let's
Do It Again, which stars Sidney Poitier. He directed it, but it also stars Bill Cosby and Jimmy Walker. So it was an all-star black cast. It's about blue-collar workers who decide they're going to rig a boxing match. You get the Star Trek episode, A Piece of the Action. Actually, it's not the Star Trek episode, but another Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier mashup. Then you get Stir Crazy in 1980.
Yeah.
You get that's followed by Gilda Radner and Gene Wilder in Hanky Panky. 1985, Fast Forward, which is a movie about a dance troupe from Ohio. I've never seen it. No idea. The last movie he directed is sadly Ghost Dad.
Oh, I didn't realize he directed Ghost Dad.
Neither did I.
How did I not know that?
Yeah, he directed Ghost Dad.
Jeez, what a terrible movie.
What are you talking about? It's Ghost Dad. He's a dad who's a ghost.
Oh my gosh. I remember being so excited. I did not know, but I remember being excited to see that movie just because I was a huge Cosby fan at the time.
And the only thing better than that would have been Leonard Part 6.
So anyway, as we think about
that sucked as a kid. I wonder how bad it is now.
I'm sure it's just as bad, if not more terrible. Especially now, you're like going, I should feel guilty watching this for more than one reason.
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, sure.
We'll just say that. Go ahead.
Sure, go.
James, go.
James. So is that all you got on Poitier?
No. What I want to say, so Poitier also was obviously involved in the civil rights movement. He did get involved. So the summer of 1963, Poitier joined Harry Belafonte and a legion of what were then considered liberal stars, including Charlton Heston and Marlon Brando, and they were involved in the March on Washington.
Charlton Heston?
Yes. So the other thing, though, that happened that is another reason we should take a moment and actually talk about Sidney Poitier. I say if you pry into his private life and you're worried about his marriage, you might be a little bit upset if you're not into, adultery or whatever. But the other side of it is the idea of what he did. So Harry Belafonte and Poitier risked their lives because they took bags of cash. They put them in doctor's bags so people would think they were just medicine or something. And they actually drove them through Mississippi to bail out jailed civil rights demonstrators during the Freedom Summer of 1964. Now, we can talk about his movies, and I have. We can talk about his directing, Your Love of Ghost Dad. But there is also this other side to him. Not only did he play characters that challenge racial themes, Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier together went into Mississippi, which in 1964 was not exactly the place you would think they would want to hang out. But they felt serious enough about it. They felt it was really important. Poitier would go on to become friends with Martin Luther King, obviously, sadly, briefly. And so as we think about this, and as we see that, and if you go back and see some of the speeches Poitier gave, he began to refer to himself as the old man in 1960s. He was just 40 years old, but he started to realize that a lot of people didn't get 40 years either. And so his involvement there, his work in the 1960s to actually not only make films that challenge racial themes, but actually to stand up and bail people out of prison and do things like that for the civil rights movement. The loss of Sidney Poitier isn't shocking. He was in his 90s. What, however, it means is that we do need to take a moment, not just talk about his films, some of which are really good, but also acknowledge that he was more than just an actor.
Right.
He did do some things, some bad or challenging, we should say, not necessarily bad.
Well, everybody sucks.
But he also did a lot of good, and he put his money where his mouth was. And so Poitier once said about Martin Luther King, "I know the fact that the courage of this man has made a better man of me. You are truly a new man in an old world." And so, just to have that connection and to really put your heart into it and put your money where your mouth is, Sidney Poitier was more than an actor. He was a complete human being.
Right. Well, all right.
Follow that up, Chad.
All right, Chad.
All right.
Time for you to talk about the next son of a bitch that's burned off this mortal coil or whatever it's called.
So when we were first talking about this show,
I said motor coil. I meant to say mortal coil.
Motor oil burned up his
motor coil. Actually, there's coils for motors. Keep going, Chad.
Yeah, and I don't think mine is going to be as long as your all's, but I do want to talk about.
He didn't make it as long.
Yeah, and well, so the thing is, when we were developed the topic for this show, it was 3 deaths that just hit us all within a week. And, Joe was like, okay, we need to do this one. I'll take this actor, or I'll take Bogdanovich. James will take Poitier. Chad, can you handle the last person we're going to talk about, which James kind of hinted at? And I was kind of hesitant because as much as I appreciated all 3 of these people, none of them had a personal tie to me at all. And then 2 days after we had developed the topic for this show, I looked at my phone and got an alert, and my heart sunk out because we lost Bob Saget. He was a very important part of my childhood.
Oh, we knew where he was at. His body was in Orlando.
Yep.
Pretty sure Bob wouldn't have got mad for me for making that joke.
Yeah, no, he would have. We didn't
lose him. Fucker died in Orlando.
Yeah,
he's still there. Jeff Ross found his car at the airport with John Mayer.
Interesting.
Well, John Mayer posted the video. Yeah, posted the video, Chad. Go watch it. He breaks up 3 times crying.
Mayer,
they're the ones who went and got his airport car from the airport because the son of a bitch is too lazy to not die in Orlando. He had to go get it for his widow. And then they bitched that the people at LAX would not. It's like, it's Bob Saget. He just died. They still made them pay the $200 parking.
But well, Jeffrey Ross may have had a problem with that, but John Mayer. But no, no. And I just got a little choked up about it too. That's when I texted both of these guys and said, guys, Bob Saget just died. And I don't think either one of you knew at that point.
No.
And then I had to say, we had to revisit this topic because we had to include Bob Saget, because Bob Saget was an integral part of my childhood. As much as I can't watch it now, Full House was a huge part of my childhood. Now, there was another up until maybe 10 years ago, there was a competition as to who America's Dad was, but somebody else kind of fell out of favor. And Bob Saget's kind of taken.
Who fell out of favor, Chad?
Did he work with Poitier?
He did work with Poitier.
Yes, he did. It was Harvey
Jimmy
Keitel.
How could you let us down?
But no, he and Bob Saget took the crown as Danny Tanner. Now, as a kid, I didn't have cable or anything like that, so I had my 3 stations. And if you had to tell me my top 5 favorite shows as a child, Full House would have been at the top. And it was just every week he was the perfect dad. He took care of his 3 daughters. He had his 2 best friends helping him along the way. And he had a lot of smaller roles. He was a comedian at first, which I'm going to talk about later. But he had some small roles. He started out doing an episode of Bosom Buddies, and then Full Moon High as the sportscaster. I've actually never seen Full Moon High. It's one of those ones I've wanted to see just to see how terrible it is. But then he did some TV work until one of those being one of my other top 5 favorite shows is from my childhood, Quantum Leap. But shortly after that, he got cast as Danny Tanner in Full House. And it was there that he did that show for how many years?
Oh, at least 8 or 9 years.
8 years, 1987 to 1995. And then he did some minor TV work, cameos, movies here and there. I believe he actually did a movie based on the death of his sister, who had a rare disease.
And he did fundraising for that up until he passed away. I mean,
right.
He furthered science, or tried to, by fundraising for it.
Scleroderma, a connective tissue disease is what it's called.
Yeah, for the skin. It's a very painful way to go.
Yes, and he has and this is one of those quotes that should go down in history. And it is so healthy to laugh, and I'm out there doing it, and I know it's healing for people. That's one of the things he said regarding his sister's death and why it's important to laugh. That's how he got through it. But shortly after that happened, something amazing happened, and I don't know. And I'm going to ask this question to you all. But first, I want to talk about what happened after 1997. The year 1998 hit. And then that's where we saw
fall of 1997 like a son of a gun, doesn't it?
1998 is where we suddenly saw Bob Saget in a new light. First, we had Half Baked, where he went on a tangent about sucking dick for crack.
Potts does it. Suck that guy's dick.
And I'm like, what is this?
Can I pause real quick? He would later say, what I said's not funny. The guy you hear screaming, I saw him do it too. That's the funny part.
I don't know. Yeah.
Bob Saget has went on record more than once going, what I said, not all that funny. The guy you hear go, I saw him do it too. That's what's funny.
And it's just, you hear that. And then the same year, he directed Dirty Work, which is just one of the great, it's a classic. Now it's a classic comedy. Then it wasn't so much. It kind of came and went. But for us, I loved it. I loved it.
I appreciate it more now than I did. I didn't care for it that much at the time, but now I like it.
Oh man. And the humor in it was just, and 18-year-old me was really into movie directors. So I had to know Bob Saget was the director, but it didn't dawn on me that he was the director until like a couple years later. And then this is where I'm going to ask you all this question. When did you all first find out about his stand-up routines, about how he actually did comedy?
Sometime in the, I was in this mid to late 90s. I was in college. I'm sure that Bob Saget wasn't. I think I probably knew it a little bit. I remember him being in an interview or doing something saying, I just want to, after the show ended, say, fuck the blah, blah, blah. I just want to say son of a bitch and shit and cunt.
Well, and that's something that's something I didn't even mention is also during that run of Full House, he also was doing America's Funniest Home Videos.
Yeah.
Which again was this other clean cut TV show. And I want to do wasn't able to do the research on it, but I think he may have been the first person in history that had 2 top 5 shows on them simultaneously. Full House and America's Funniest Home Videos were in the top 5 TV show rating of that time frame. And he was the only person ever to do that. And I think till this time, is still the only
hopefully.
Yeah.
He deserves it.
God. And again, that year, America's Funniest Home Videos, again, it was Sunday night at 7:00. I had 3 stations. It was literally 2.5 hours, 3 hours before I was to go to bed and start the week of not having a great time at school. And him along with The Simpsons kind of got me into that mindset of going, okay, you're going to be okay.
Well, it was comfort food, right? I mean, there wasn't much.
It was YouTube before YouTube.
Yeah. And it was, and I think it's one of the things that, none of it's memorable, right? I mean, I never think back to, what a good episode of America's Funniest Home Videos, episode 17. Nobody does that. I'm sure somebody does. But to me, it continued a tradition, like you were talking about, Chad. The fact that it came out on Sunday, and it was just something to wind down. Something you're not going to be taxed by it. You're not going to sit there and have to think about the esoteric meaning. It was like hee-haw. I mean, it was escapism and silliness, and it didn't really matter.
Just to see somebody get hit in the balls with a baseball.
Yeah.
That's all it was.
In groin.
And he did all those annoying voices. I didn't know that at the time. I found out later.
You didn't know those were him?
Oh God. Okay. Out of the 3 of us, I hated this shit when it was on when I was a kid too. So I couldn't.
Well, you had satellite though, right?
Yeah, I did.
Didn't have any options.
And I could. Yeah. And then I was subjected to America's Funniest Home Videos, and every once in a while there would be something, because it's hard not to laugh at somebody getting hit in the balls. Chad, you're all
football in groin.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. No. It's hard not to, but it was. Oh God.
Yeah, and then like I said, like James just said, Joe had satellite, so he actually had options. We had.
And no, I had to watch that shit.
Yeah,
and there was other people in that house. I didn't get to choose, especially
Sunday. That's what my kids will never understand.
And Sunday night,
right, James, right? Yeah,
because if I walk up right now, so I was playing video games. I walk up right now and say, "Daddy wants the TV." I'll get, you can wait.
I will say this: I was forced to watch America's Funniest Home Videos because it was all that was on, and I had a house full of 6 people, and. I was like, okay, I can settle for this. America's Most Wanted. I would go out of the room because I'm just like, I don't really want to watch that on Saturday nights, but Sunday night, and it would honestly, it would provide.
Cops and America's Most Wanted.
Oh God, yeah, God, I hated those shows. Saturday night was ruined. But anyway, so yeah, those shows. But then, James, when did you find out he was a dirty comedian? When did you find out that he was like that filthy?
James, this is where you go, what?
Well, I mean, honestly,
I've got a story about that I want to tell after James.
Honestly, it's one of the things that I heard about long before I ever got to hear it. Right? Like, I can remember people saying, like, it being on, watching Full House, and it may have been my dad even, because my dad drove a long distance to work, so he would listen to anything in his car, books on tape. Tapes were these things that were like CDs. CDs are like MP3s given form. Anyway, but so I'm sure my dad had listened to probably some stand-up cassette tapes or something. So I think my dad saying that's not how he actually is. I vaguely remember Dad saying that back when it was on the air. Yeah, I'm sure Dad had seen his stand-up or heard his stand-up somewhere. But yeah, so I kind of always knew. And to me, even as a kid, I'm like, well, good for him, right? I mean, Danny Tanner as a character, man, when you're literally like, oh, put some spice on him and he could be the next Andy Taylor. I mean,
I honestly can't talk about Full House because I bet you I have only seen a handful of episodes in my life.
Oh man, I could probably honestly tell you I've seen every single episode of Full House.
What about the new one?
No, I can't watch that. That's just terrible. I can't watch it. I couldn't. I tried to watch the first episode, guys.
Is it worse than the original?
Full disclosure. I'll be completely honest. It's the original. I've tried to watch the original, trying to recapture that love of it that I have. The same thing with animation. Like, I love animation. I can actually rewatch animation and still find a love for it. Full House, no. Yeah, it's one of those shows that it was just a product of its time for me, and I have moved on from that cheesy sitcom writing. But yeah, I mean, it was Danny Tanner who was obsessed with cleanliness and everything was goody goody. To holy crap, he's telling a cock joke.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not just about the cock. It's about the placement of the cock, the inappropriate placement of the cock. The inappropriate family members that are watching the inappropriate placement of the cock.
But yeah, and it was just, I was shocked. But yeah, 1998, we saw a little bit of it in not only Half Baked, but his directorial debut in Dirty Work. And we had heard about it for years, and I just never seen the routines. And then 7 years later, in 2005, we get the Aristocrats. Mm-hmm. And then that's when I see Bob Saget in all his glory. And actually seeing him talk and do the joke. And I'm going to butcher it. So James, I hope one of you can come in and save me with this. But when the one comedian is right before, it's building up to him telling the Aristocrats joke, and they're talking about how filthy Bob Saget actually is.
Yeah.
And she goes, he put a box, he gave me a present, put a box of tampons on top of the TV.
It's the extra small size.
Yeah, it's the extra small size because he wanted her to envision
other people thinking she was tight.
Yeah. There you go.
You just don't want to say it? Is that because is it a girl dad thing, or you just
I couldn't remember the context.
Yeah, no. So basically what he did was he bought this comedian friend of his, and this is not an insult. These are comedians. He's one of these comedians.
Yeah, it's all comedians who are friends who are telling each other jokes.
And everybody talking about how nasty Bob Saget was, and buying her the extra small tampons and telling so he could leave them out so everybody would think she's really tight and small. Her vagina. Yeah. Which it wasn't. Which is the point of the whole thing. Yes. Yeah. Her vagina was not tight and small.
Do you all, I don't know if you all know this story or not, but it's something that I found fascinating, which again goes against the Danny Tanner character that he played. Do you know what Rodney Dangerfield's widow gave him after Rodney passed? I
know he and Rodney were really close, but I don't.
After he did Full House and a couple of TV shows, he was a bit part in Meet Waldy Sparks as a reporter. But yeah, James, go ahead.
Joan Dangerfield thought that Bob Saget would said, "I think Rodney would like you to have this," and gave Bob Saget Rodney Dangerfield's pot pipe.
Good. He's going to say his robe or the dildo.
Nope. He owned Rodney Dangerfield's pot pipe at the request of Rodney Dangerfield's widow.
So Bob, I didn't know if you wanted. Bob Saget was hilarious, but also probably not the funniest comedian. He was really dirty, but he's not the funniest comedian. Here's what set Bob Saget apart from most people in this world. And I shared a quote about this on Twitter, and it came from James. You re-quoted it and you liked it, and some other people. I forgot who said. Oh, I remember. It was Tom Arnold. Tom Arnold said, the best thing you can say about Bob, the worst thing you'll ever hear about Bob Saget was from his friends. And by the way, when I go, if that is the nicest thing said about me, I have lived a good life.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have lived a good life, because not one person you have seen, even including the fact that the man had an ex-wife, has said one disparaging thing about him now in 2 weeks.
Right.
It is one video after another of, I don't know how I'm going to move on. He told me he loved me every day.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Yeah, everybody he talked to or texted, he would always end it with, "I love you."
Yep.
Well, and so one of the things that has came up, and it's actually on his trivia page on IMDb, if you go to trivia under Bob Saget, he is one of the only comedians to be hailed by sometimes the same source as both the best comedian and the worst comedian.
Yep.
And I think he's
a middle of the road comedian.
Yeah, he's a middle of the road comedian.
Above average person.
Yeah. No, yeah. And that's, and I'll wrap up, just because, there are some things that we lost Norm Macdonald last year. We did almost a 2-hour episode on him.
And that guy is the comedian's comedian.
And he is the comedian's comedian. And they were best friends. There was talk of Dirty Work 2.
Who, by the way, could not, Norm Macdonald couldn't say anything bad about him at his own roast.
No, yeah, he sit there and read like jokes out of a book, right?
Yeah. Old jokes from 1920.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just his list of career is not as impressive as Bogdanovich or Poitier, but the level of people he impacted, I think, outweighs at least Bogdanovich in terms of, you know, what he brought to just regular people. So he's going to be missed at a different level than the other two.
And he was younger.
He was 65, 66.
65.
And it's probably going to be, I would imagine, most things I've read, it's going to probably be a heart attack or stroke or something like that he didn't know he was going to have. There's something out there for us all.
He had lost one. I think he had three sisters, one of which he lost to stroke when she was 34. Yeah. I'm not saying it could be a family issue, but as someone that has, Lord knows, if you cut my genetics open, I'm in trouble.
Same here.
But he was working on, and you mentioned Twitter and all the outpouring. One of the things I think is Patton Oswalt tweeted, he just interviewed me for a documentary 2 weeks ago or something like that. I may have the exact timeline wrong, and
I was trying to figure out if that was the Martin Mull documentary. So I really would like to. I hope they finish that, because I would love to see a Martin Mull documentary.
Well, allegedly in IMDb, you know, hit or miss, it sometimes credits people that aren't in it. Don't worry, Mr. Philip Huber, I remember. You know, sometimes it's not accurate, but it says that it's now in post-production. So hopefully that is true. Hopefully they can finish that. If for no other reason, and I love Martin Mull, but if for no other reason, also to honor, you know, Bob Saget's last work there. And he also had one pending film coming out, which is Killing Daniel, which was complete. So that should be released. I know nothing about it, but it's eventually probably going to come out.
All right. Sure
all right. So yeah, if you get a chance, one last thing I'll say, it's on Instagram, John Mayer and Jeff Ross going to the airport, of all the two people to be riding together in a Prius, but was to pick up Bob's Prius from the airport. And because they'd been hanging out in his house, which was, they kept joking, a full house full of people from fucking Full House, foraging for food, going, who's going to go get more food, for the last few days, talking about their missing friend in it. And it's kind of heart-wrenching. He does a really good job for the first 7 or 8 minutes, but you can actually see John Mayer having an issue dealing. And he says, I've never lost anyone. And the one person who I'd call to ask about how you're supposed to deal with this is the one I lost.
Yeah, it's rough.
So anybody who has friends from Rodney Dangerfield to John Mayer to Jeff Ross, who's our last one, gentlemen? Betty White.
Betty White.
And the thing is with Betty is that she was 99 years old. She was almost 100. I knew her from, I'm of a certain age. If you're older than me, then you knew her from Rhoda or Ma. You knew her from, let's see, what else? You knew her from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. She was also on Rhoda, correct?
Yeah.
Then you know her from Match Game, which is her husband was a host who she missed, whom for the last 30 or 40 years she talked about how she.
I think you're thinking of Password, not Match Game. Match Game was Gene Rayburn.
Joe made several appearances on Santa Barbara.
Did she really?
Yeah.
Yikes.
I didn't know Betty White was on Santa Barbara.
It was it was an in-show, I guess, kind of joke that you could win a contest and you got to meet Betty White, so she played herself effectively, something like that. I didn't watch Santa Barbara.
I did. It was another one of those I was subjected to. It came on after Another World. So
yes.
Days of Our Life.
Days of Our Lives was on at 1 and then 2 and then 3. So what I was going to say is Golden Girls. I watched the Golden Girls as a kid. You guys are subjected to other things. I was subjected to Golden Girls. I actually love Golden Girls. As I got older, I loved it even more. To this day, I wish I could get the little son of a bitch 4.5-year-old to watch it with me. He just kind of tunes out because he doesn't get any of the jokes. I think it's a show, and they're not all hit and miss, but God bless America, it still holds up. And some of it is really is like, how the hell did they get away with that on Saturday night on NBC?
Well, and here's what I was going to say, and this is what makes it different than Full House and why you can go back. There are episodes of Golden Girls that went over my head when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But there's also episodes that actually say something. There is an episode, and credit to Betty White's acting here, but there is an episode that makes it almost like All in the Family, where she has to deal with, she may have AIDS from a blood transfusion.
Yep.
And you've got to remember when that show was set, that was, you didn't watch Saturday sitcoms and want to deal with AIDS. You didn't. And so.
Yeah, you either watch people get arrested or look for people to get arrested.
Yeah, I mean, you wanted to watch Jessica Fletcher kill 17 people and blame it on somebody else.
Well, it didn't even stop there. They did a show about fertilization, about just going to the sperm doctor. That had never been done on television at the time, at the 80s. Blanche's daughter wants to do that. They did a show, several shows on acceptance of homosexuality, which I mean, other than Soap was the only other show I can think of before that dealt with that, at least on a serious level. And it was a funny show.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, cross-dressing. I don't even know if people remember, but B. Arthur's brother on the show, Phil, they always talked about Phil, but Sophia always had jokes about he's a cross-dresser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love the Golden Girls. That's where I learned Betty White. Then and then she actually has one of the best lines in cinema history in the last 20 to 30 years of cinema history. What is it, gentlemen?
Are you talking about from Lake Placid?
It's from Lake Placid.
Yeah,
you want me to do it?
Go do it.
This is where if I had a dick, I'd tell you to suck it.
Good.
Yep.
I hope the crocodile wins. She loved animals. She was a huge animal rights. Her and B. Arthur and Rue were against fur before it was fashionable to be against fur. Betty White turned down the mom role and as good as it gets because of the scene where the puppy dog is shoved down, where Jack Nicholson picks it up. He doesn't kill the dog or anything. It's just a scene in a movie. But when he puts it down the laundry chute, she refused to be in the movie.
And I'm jumping.
But she did Lake Placid. But in her fairness, the crazy person in Lake Placid is pulling for the crocodile.
And James, before you go on, I do want to talk about, and she also was such an animal advocate that she fought Bob Barker. There was at a zoo in California, they had an elephant exhibit, and they were trying to expand it to help preserve elephants. And Bob Barker was against it because he didn't want them being put in a zoo. Betty White gave them money to expand it out. And Bob Barker was so pissed he would not attend an award show if Betty White was going to be there. In all fairness, I would pick Betty White over Bob Barker any day of the week. James, what were you going to say? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. There's two things that came out over on Twitter. Two very different people shared. One is now, obviously, it's been 20 years since Golden Girls was on the air. Golden Palace actually was the one that he worked on, but it was Golden Girls. Anyway, he was a writer. He wrote, 4 episodes of Golden Girls, but you got to be on set. And he said years later, he's went on to do other stuff. I'm forgetting who it is. I apologize. But he was saying years later, I got to do another thing that Betty White was part of. And I assumed she would not. It's been 20 years. And I was a writer on a couple episodes. Who am I? And he said, so I went in and I was like, oh, it's great to be working with you. I thought I'd have to tell the entire story. And she said, you're the writer. You wrote. And she went on to say, and actually, this is a quote that's on her IMDb page as well. She loved the writers. She appreciated what they brought. And the quote that she has on the IMDb page is, the writers are the stars of every really successful sitcom. That if you're doing a sitcom and you're going to keep it fresh and keep people laughing, you need good writers. That's a great story. But I also appreciated the fact that in counterpoint to that, and if you've seen Golden Girls, you know the exact scene where they let her ad lib and B. Arthur and Rue Mcclanahan break character, but they kept it in the show because it was just because they're asking her about the mackerel circus or something. about back in St. Olaf and all that stuff. And she goes, oh no, it was this, either the two families were fighting because the Sturtevanters wanted to raise the fish for farming to sell for food. And the other family, the Ogilsons, they wanted to sell them for, the sturgeon circus. And B. Arthur's line back is supposed to be, what was the sturgeon circus like? And then they just let Betty White ad lib. If you've not seen this clip in a while, go and watch it. It is hilarious because she starts going, and then B. Arthur, again, she starts laughing in reality, but she just keeps going. She goes, Rose, what did that involve? And go, they didn't shoot a fish out of a cannon, did they? Oh, only once. And then the other fish wouldn't go. And Rue Mcclanahan loses it. And they're just laughing, and she starts smacking the table. They left it in. It was all ad-libbed. So an appreciation for writers in that. But the other story that I loved, and one of the most heartbreaking tweets I think I saw about it, because I don't remember the movie, to be honest, but Ryan Reynolds tweeted out a behind the scenes thing, and I guess it was actually done as kind of a DVD bonus feature, an ad, about working with Betty White, and he said she was phenomenal. And he said, but I think I need to share this clip again. And of course, it's all staged. As Betty White comes over, she's sitting in her acting chair, kind of the director's chair, and Ryan Reynolds goes over and goes, hey, Betty. And she goes, I want my coffee. Yeah, no, but Betty, we've been making this film for 3 weeks together. I'm Ryan Reynolds. I'm an actor. I'm the love interest in the film.
I think it's the proposal, but keep going.
It is a proposal, but anyway, but I'm the love interest. Yeah. Well, I don't care who you are. When Betty White says she wants coffee, somebody gets Betty White her coffee, and they go back and forth, and finally Ryan Reynolds loses his temper and screams at her, "You're just a terrible human being. You're awful. I don't know why anybody wants to work with you." And Sandra Bullock comes over and says, "Oh my God, why are you talking to Betty White? This is America's grandmother. You can't talk to her like this. She sells tickets. Nobody cares who Ryan Reynolds is. Nobody cares. I sell tickets. I'm America's sweetheart. This is America's girl. Nobody cares about you, Ryan Reynolds." And in the background, Betty White's flipping him off. Where only, and it's all staged, but it's just so funny because, again, it plays to the fact that she liked dark humor. She could play it well. Lake Placid being an example of that.
She was the slutty one on Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah,
we remember her as Rose, as the ditzy idiot from St. Olaf.
And originally they wanted to cast her as Blanche,
but she wanted to play Rose. That's right. Rue Mcclanahan was not the one. It was going to be Betty White as Blanche.
Yep.
But she wanted to play Rose, and she went to her grave saying Rose was her favorite character she ever played. And by the way, Chad's right. It was password. I couldn't remember it's Alan Lunn. And that was her second husband. And
you doubted me?
No, I couldn't remember.
You want to come at me, bro?
No, I have too much COVID.
That was her third husband.
Good point. Too much COVID.
I've got some.
Is it her second or third husband?
Third.
He died early as a heart, in the early 80s and in his 60s. And she missed him till she passed. She talked about she eventually, what she really wanted was to have a drink with Alan.
Yeah, but I do love some of her quotes about that because he had been dead for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite quotes that she has about that topic there's two. I think older women still have a lot of fun and can still have a lot of fun and life. And then let me get it because I don't want to misquote her because heaven forbid. Let's see. Come on, I just had the quote and I lost it. I've enjoyed the opposite sex a lot. Always have, always will.
That's good. Yeah, so Betty White, national treasure. Everybody loved her. Did so much for animals. I just think her and Bob Barker having a slap fight would have been hilarious. I didn't know anything about the Bob Barker thing until she died either, Chad.
Yeah.
And you're right, over elephants in a zoo.
But the other part about it is, she
and all Bob Barker want to do is spay everybody. That'd save him.
One of the things
even the male elephants, spay them. That isn't how they work, Bob.
Spay and neuter. Actually, I got both sides of that argument.
the other thing is, though, what some people know more recently, and I guess it's 2010, it's been quite some time, but when she hosted Saturday Night Live. Yeah. And it was, if you go back and read some of the interviews, she talks about after she did it.
You mean with her moist muffin?
Yeah, well, and she says she'll never do it again. She says it's too hard. And she was too nervous. And I was like, Betty White being nervous, but it was live.
Well, and she lived history. She was around from the 40s to 2022. Barely 2022.
Yeah, the one comparison, and I hate it every time I look up with something about Betty White online, it's the first thing you see. Yes, she was older than sliced bread.
Oh, is she really? I didn't see. I've never seen that. I didn't.
You seriously never seen that?
I hadn't seen that. No.
You look up Betty White facts. It's everywhere. She's older than sliced bread. Yeah. It's like
no. I didn't see that, but she was there for the dawn of television and worked in entertainment when women didn't work in entertainment in that capacity till 2022.
Well, and
2021.
And there's also, speaking of which, no, not that. Sorry. I was making a note and I messed up. She was also known for pushing boundaries, talking about Sidney Poitier, but she famously, one of her early shows got canceled because she had an African-American dancer on, and I'm forgetting the gentleman's name. And they told her, you don't need to do that. You shouldn't do that. You'll have to cut that. And she goes, no, I'm not going to. And I mean, that was 1950s.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to allow that to happen. So.
Well, I think we probably should start wrapping it up. Go ahead.
I just got a question for you all. So I do want to briefly mention two losses that we had in the previous year that we can't do a whole show on, but they were equally devastating to me. I actually did cry a tear when I read both of these, and they were pretty in quick succession. So we did lose Marky Post and Charles Robinson, 2 stars of Night Court. Two of those two people had a very important part of me, and with them gone, it really felt like a piece of me left with them, because they just were very important to me in my childhood and in my adulthood, because I still do love Night Court. And it's one of those.
Court is a timeless show that doesn't get aired the way it should.
Yeah, Night Court and Wings to me are the two unappreciated too.
I completely agree with that statement. Completely, those were 2 shows that I loved as a child, and I can still watch to this day and find enjoyment.
I haven't watched either one in a long time because it's actually harder to find Night Court.
Yeah, I've almost bought the complete box set of the entire series on DVD just so I can have it.
Do that because it's harder and is that even streaming anywhere?
I think you.
I'm going to look that up in a minute. I think you can find Wings, but I think Night Court's hard to find.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all. I just wanted to briefly mention Marky Post and Charles Robinson. We lost them recently too, and it was just a hard loss for me to see those two go. Especially that Charles Robinson was at that age. Marky Post was still relatively young, died of cancer. It was rough. So that's it.
I'm an idiot. It's all on Amazon. Sorry.
Really quick.
It is.
I want to.
I know. I was like, woohoo! I'm going to add it.
I want to jump back to Betty White, and actually more, I guess, the entire cast of Golden Girls, because she was the last surviving major cast member, even though she was the oldest. That being said,
hold on. Was she's slightly older than Estelle? Was it her, then Rue, and then Estelle, and then
Betty White?
Rue was the youngest. I'm so sorry. It was Betty, B, Estelle, and Rue. Rue was the youngest by almost 10 years.
Yes. Yep. That being said, the thing that I was thinking about is how often their careers intersected, because oddly enough, Betty White, even though being older, Betty White portrayed the Ellen Harper, who was the niece of Rue Mcclanahan's character on Mama's Family.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Maude, which was obviously B. Arthur. But that show had appearances by other Golden Girls. And so I was just wondering, I wonder if anybody's ever tracked how often their careers intersected, even if it was just in guest appearances.
Well, they knew each other. They all knew each other beforehand. I don't know how many times it have. B was the pain in the ass in the show.
Yeah, B
was the contrarian.
Yeah, that was one of the things, because I mean, obviously they could
And her and B did not get it. She never thought B liked her. And I actually don't think that B cared that much about her.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but and this is the flip side of that argument. How many of us work with people that we don't necessarily, want to hang out with outside of work, right?
I mean, every damn day I work with you. I mean, forget it. What were we talking about?
No, I mean, I get it. I'm a lot to take. I mean, you
sure are. You're more man than. And with that note, I
was actually going to make it into a joke where I'm like, you got to handle your unwanted advances toward me, so I don't turn you into HR.
Woo! And with that, sorry if this was a depressing episode, but we wanted to try to get several people in who were what we've said before, iconoclasts. So this has been Bonehead Weekly. Anything to add?
Hopefully nobody else dies and we don't have to do another one of these episodes for a while.
Well, actually, I'm just going to stand on hopefully no one else we know close to us dies. Okay, I'm the only one hoping for that.
But I mean, if we could just not have any icons die for a while. I was saying though, and this is not an invitation to have a betting pool, but as I was sitting there going, oh my God, we've lost. All of a sudden, I started to think, what other icons do we have left?
Mel Brooks.
And that's what I want. Mel Brooks.
Oh Jesus, J. Joe, what did you just do?
It's Mel Brooks. They're all in their 90s, dude. It's Mel Brooks.
I know, but usually when we say
we also didn't do
a
show about Carl Reiner. We could spend 2 hours on Carl Reiner.
Oh yeah, easily. Just his right anyway. But Mel Brooks, Dick Van Dyke, William Shatner. I was sitting there going, "Oh my God,
they're all in their 90s."
All these icons that I grew up watching in reruns because that's what the local channels aired, and I'm like, "Oh man, we're going to lose them." And I hope I'm not wrong. Eventually, it will happen. But I was just thinking, man, I don't know. Like, I don't want to live in a world without Mel Brooks.
I don't either. But I also want him to go before me.
Well, yeah, no.
There we go. Unless he lives to be 200, in which case, okay, I'm okay with it.
To quote Abe Simpson, oh, I never thought I'd know the joy of outliving my child. That's a dark episode, by the way.
Yeah. All right. This has been Bonehead Weekly.